Warning, adventurers, the following episode does deal very heavily in character deaths. The following franchises will be spoiled in this episode: Watchmen, Fullmetal Alchemist, Gurren Lagann, Yu Hakusho, Star Wars, Eragon, Dragonball Z, Hunter x Hunter, Naruto, and JoJo Part 5. Adventure at your own risk. Welcome back, lords and lovelies, to the Knights of the Round podcast. Thanks for tuning in for our second episode. I am Ravah Dumort, Lady Ravah, and this is my wonderful co-host joining me face-to-face this time.
Lord Arthur. We've made some upgrades since our first one, so we're no longer facing away from each other. We now got nicer microphones. We're facing towards each other, and it was all thanks to some great help from our sound guy. But welcome back. We're so grateful to see the positive reactions from our first podcast.
Our first podcast on YouTube, we have, I believe, as of the recording of this, we've got about 25 subscribers. We've got about 50 views or listens on our first podcast, which doesn't seem like a lot, but for me, that's super exciting because the most views I've ever seen on YouTube was a video I uploaded when I was like 13 and it had like 15 views because it was me and my friends being dumb. So thank you so much. If you are also looking for other places, we are now also currently on Anchor Podcasts and Spotify. We will also be uploading to Google Podcasts and Apple Podcasts as well. But those are not, as of this recording, places that we are on just yet, but we will be uploading there. But thank you for those of you who have already listened, and we hope you enjoy this next episode. So Arthur, what's our topic for today?
Death. Specifically, character death. We're going to be talking about our particular favorite and least favorite character deaths throughout different types of media, books, movies, video games, anime, blah, blah, blah. We are going to be listing specifically our criteria, what makes a good death and what makes a bad death, because we've all had that moment where a character dies in, one of our favorite books or on a movie that we really love, and we're like, oh my God, no, that's horrible, and lasts with us for years and years and years. And we've also had those moments where it's like, really? That just happened? That's bullshit.
So character deaths has become a more commonplace, I think, in modern media than it used to be. When we were kids, and at least maybe it was something we didn't notice, but it wasn't as common. Now, the killing of a character is a very common thing, even in kids' movies. Princess and the Frog, 2009.
Coco.
You see a lot of character deaths in those. So now it's become a new thing, but killing a character is more of an art form. You can't just decide to kill a character. So we've actually, we've got our notes prepared this time, so hopefully we will have a more streamlined direction and not just be kind of talking all over the place. So each of us has actually come up with our personal criteria of what we believe is a way to kill a character properly. And there's not really a way to properly do it, but there are criteria that you should meet before you decide to kill off a character. And it can depend on your world, your series. But in general, there are things that you should and shouldn't do to artfully or to, rightfully give your character a death in your respective series.
And again, these are all of our subjective opinions. These are what we personally look for in a character death. And it depends from property to property. Like, you can't really compare the death of characters from, say, Grave of the Fireflies to death of characters from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There's different emotions that these different artworks are trying to portray. And so the method through which they would want to kill a character are going to be completely opposite.
So, Arthur, what do you have written down? Like, what to you, before we even talk about examples, what is it that makes a character death good? Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
But one of the things I do want to preface is that we're not really going to be talking about horror movie character deaths.
Yes.
I had a lot of those mentioned to me, actually, when I was asking for suggestions. But when you watch a horror movie, you expect the characters to die. And there are ways to do that, well in a horror movie. But that is not what we're talking about today, unless it was like a character in like a horror movie series. So I just wanted to preface with that our examples and our criteria doesn't really fit well into the horror genre.
Yeah, and again, horror is its own. don't mind the pun, its own beast. It has its own rules that you want to try to follow, and they, like I said before, are completely opposite than, say, an action movie or a thriller even. That is, it's close, it's similar, but you do want something a lot different from a horror death. Because again, like Ravah mentioned, you go into a horror movie knowing that people are going to die. But to go back, you gave me the first one. The first thing that I had written down, because the first thing that came to my mind when I asked, all right, what makes for a good death, is that it has to have a meaningful impact on the world and the story that it is being told in. Going back to my Grave of the Fireflies example, literally the character dying in Grave of the Fireflies has no effect on the world at large, but it has a great impact on the story that's being told.
So I have the same thing. I do, to properly kill a character, the character death has to have some kind of meaning or purpose, either to the characters, to the world, or in some way. It's got to impact something. And if it doesn't, then what was really the point of killing your character? And it doesn't have to be in a good way. It could negatively affect your character. This goes back to the idea of your dynamic and static characters. A character death could influence a character to become dynamic, but again, they don't have to change for the better because of a death. So I totally agree. I definitely think that if you want to do your character death right, it needs to have some kind of impact in or for the story it's trying to tell.
Actually, just kind of like to have a case in point of a death impacting other characters. When Anakin Skywalker's mom dies in Attack of the Clones, it is the catalyst that pushes him further down the dark side and forces, and doesn't force him, but it compels him to do an evil deed. And so that is an example of a character death inspiring and impacting those around it. The second thing that I had listed, I'm not sure if you have it, but for me, it has to stay consistent with the rules of the story being told. It is so unsatisfying to have a character die for seemingly no reason, or for that death to be completely contrary to how the world has been set up. Like if you introduce a character that, let's say they're immune to knives, like that is one of their defining character traits, is that they cannot be stabbed. And they die because they were stabbed, then that is so stupid. Why would you set up a character that cannot be stabbed if you're going to stab them to death?
I have something similar, but I guess it would add on to that. That the death of the character should make sense for the journey of that character. It doesn't have to be, it can be sudden and quick, but death can also be as a finality or a way to end that character's journey. It should be a way to close that chapter, because ideally, and I actually have this written, and I want to read this exactly as I wrote this today when I was coming up with my notes.
I love this one.
This is in all capital letters, and it says, "I hate character resurrections that make no sense." So, I personally like a finality in death. Now, don't get me wrong, I am very excited when some of my favorite characters come back to life. But as I've gotten older, if the resurrection is pointless and doesn't make any sense, it makes me blindingly furious. I have underneath it, it says, quote, "I swear to God, if they resurrect a certain character in Sword Art Online Season 3, I will personally fly to Japan. I will walk up to this man's house who created this and who's directing this and who's telling the story. And I will make it my personal vendetta to take every left shoe." I changed it from socks to shoes because I want it to be annoying, and I want him to realize the pain that he has caused us by resurrecting a character.
You're being intentionally vague, and I understand why, because we both very much enjoy seasons 3 and 4 of Sword Art Online.
That would be Alicization and War of the Underworld, which
are fantastic. And this is coming from one of the harshest critics of season 1 and season 2 of SAO. Just to go off on a short little tangent, but building off on what you were just talking about, how like it should fit actually into the arc of the character. One of the final points that I put is that a character death should come as a natural part of the plot. It should make sense as far as the story is being told. Like, let's take Rorschach's death. Spoiler alert. In Watchmen. He basically looked Dr. Manhattan in the face and said, "You're gonna have to kill me." And Dr. Manhattan said, "Okay." And he died, because we know that like naturally that was part of the plot. Like that was what was going to happen. And having deaths that are like, yes, this person is doing something extremely dangerous that is more than likely to get them killed, makes for, in my opinion, a good character death.
So let's actually, because I'm looking at our list and I see we have very similar characters on our good list. So I want to start here.
Well, let's get to our qualities from a bad character death first.
Well, I mean, I think we've already kind of, mentioned that. I mentioned, we mentioned it should make sense. So obviously a bad character death is a character that doesn't make sense in the universe. It doesn't impact the story. It's a death that ends in a stupid resurrection. I also put, when you kill off a character, and this is something that I really believe that as you're writing, you need to ask yourself is, are you killing this character just to kill them and make your audience go, or are you killing them because their death has an actual meaning to your story and it has some kind of point in your story, or you just kind of try to shock your audience?
Yeah, I have something very similar written, is that don't kill characters just for to raise the stakes. Like, don't kill Superman just so you can show how powerful this new villain is, because that's so pointless. There's so much more you could explore with that death. If you're just doing it to show how powerful the baddie is, then you're really wasting that opportunity to kill this character. And don't do it solely for character development. There's actually a trope in writing and in fiction called the girlfriend in the fridge, where I believe it was Green Arrow comes back to his apartment and his villain is taunting him, and he finds his girlfriend has been chopped up and stuffed in the fridge. And his girlfriend, who had been a pretty cool character up until that point, fans loved them. The fans rejected that so hard, because here's this really cool character, you kill her off screen, and you do it only to further Oliver Queen's character development and for nothing else. And that's such a cheap and sad way to end a otherwise very cool character and very meaningful character to a lot of people, that it makes people angry. Like, again, there's so much more you could have done.
So back to what I was saying. So I'm looking at both of our lists and I see that we both have a similar character. Now, one of the things I told Arthur, I had to think about which moniker to call you first. One of the things I told him is, says, we can't do this episode. And I don't want to do this episode until you have finished the original Fullmetal Alchemist. He had seen up until a certain point, but he had not seen the end of the series. Now, any of you who know me personally know that Fullmetal Alchemist, the 2003 version, is my absolute favorite anime of all time. I recognize that it has its flaws. Do I proclaim it as the best anime ever? Yes, sometimes. But I think that the way... I actually just have several characters listed.
Go out. Let's just like no holds barred. Let's just name the character Maze Hughes.
Maze Hughes, and that's actually it's not the first major death, but it is the point that you had originally stopped at when you watched the series.
Now, not because I was like, oh man, they killed Maze, I'm not gonna watch it anymore, man. But because after that point, there was like 2 or 3 episodes of filler, and by the time it was actually airing on TV, it was also in the middle of a Naruto filler arc, a One Piece filler arc, and another anime that was a filler arc at the same time. And at that time, I was like, you know what? I'm just sick and tired of all this filler in anime, and I just stopped watching for like a year or two, and I started reading manga. So I did myself an immense disservice, and I stopped watching Fullmetal Alchemist like literally right after Maze Hughes dies.
So Maze Hughes' death, and I will say this, it is, because it is so similar, it is similar in Brotherhood, the original, and the manga, it is done so well. It hits all of that criteria. It directly impacts the story in both actually I would say a positive and negative way. It makes sense for the type of world that it is in. And it definitely impacts the characters around them. And again, we are going to refer to this as the original, as Arthur has not finished Brotherhood. So when we talk about it, we're going to talk about it from, the original standpoint. But Mace Hughes, and actually, this is something I didn't recognize until I watched it again with you. I've seen the show several times. But in the episodes leading up to that, this is right after the attack on Laboratory 5. One of the characters says that, Ed, Al, you've got to actually put your trust in an adult at some point, your children. And that's one of the things I actually really like. The show tries to emphasize that your children, you need to put your trust in an adult at some point. So they say, okay, well, we put our trust in Mace Hughes, which is probably the best decision they could have made.
Because honestly, he is the best character in the show. Honestly, he's my favorite character in the show, with Al being my second favorite character in the show because Al is just too gosh dang precious. But literally the moment after they're fine, we trust an adult, we pick Mace Hughes, and they get on a train and they leave town, and he gets shot. He gets murdered literally the same episode.
And up until that point in the show, I really like this standard that sets as it moves forward, because before that you have their mother dying, but we know from pretty much the beginning that she dies. Because the show starts what's called in media res, meaning it starts in the middle of the action. And the original then goes back and tells the story of how they lost their bodies and how they learned alchemy. And then you have Nina Tucker's death, which in the original is done very, very, very well.
Mm-hmm. Please elaborate on why the original anime does Nina Tucker's death much better than Brotherhood.
So Brotherhood, and I'm not saying it's not done well, but it does not have the same impact that the original does. So in the original, it is well established that you can see, it doesn't really tell you, there's no montage of a calendar flashing, but you can tell that several months, up to, I believe it's up to 6 months past, that Ed and Al are living in the Tucker household. They're living there with Nina and Alexander and Shao. And they spend 6 months with this character. We've spent 3 episodes almost with this character before
almost
she dies.
Almost a full hour of our view time.
And then she is killed, and she's killed very horrifically. And her death is the same in both series, but in Brotherhood, we are not given time to get attached to her. We feel bad about her death because this is a little girl who was fused with an animal, and then she's
exploded.
Killed. But we don't have the same impact because it's wow, this is a character that we've been with for a while. And at that point with Nina, you don't know how far the series is going to go. They combine child murder and animal murder into one. But it's so well done because of how it impacts Ed and Al for the rest of the series. Ed has to face the fact that he could not separate Nina, so there was nothing he could have done to save her. If she had stayed alive, this is the life she would have lived, and that gives him so much inner conflict. And that idea keeps coming up later on in the series.
Actually, sorry to interrupt, but it is one of the reoccurring things that is constantly thrown in Ed's face, that he grew up thinking alchemy is just this cure-all for absolutely everything. Nothing can, no problem exists that alchemy cannot fix. And it is just one of these many times where the story will just throw in his face that no, some things just cannot be fixed. No matter how hard you do, no matter what you try, it just cannot be fixed.
So with Mace Hughes, leading into Mace Hughes, yes, Nina's is the very first major character death in the series. Or the series is the very first, big impactful death that we don't see coming. But Mace Hughes, not only do we not see it coming, but it is the first time the series decides to kill a major character. I mean, think about it. Nina is important, but she's only in there for a few episodes. Ed and Al have known Mace Hughes for years. They meet before he does his alchemy exam. They meet on the train. And then, there's that time skip in the series. And then he is killed off. And
episode 26, and we get introduced to him in episode 5, I think. So we've had this character for 20 something episodes before he dies. And again, it's one of these things, going back to my point, like it needs to come as a natural part of the plot. Mace Hughes was uncovering a conspiracy. He discovered some horrible truth that the government was, secretly under the control of the villains the whole time. He was doing things that was actively putting him in harm's way. So the fact that he just gets killed out of nowhere comes as like a very natural, yes, if you're doing dangerous things, you will get dangerous consequences. And it just happened to lead to his death.
And it's also, I'm trying to think about how I want to say this. It's a point in the series where, again, the Elric brothers have to realize, and that we, the viewer, have to realize, this show is not going to pull punches.
Not a happy show.
It's not going to pull punches just because your main characters are 14 and 15 at the time the series starts. And a reason I wanted him to finish the series, something he hadn't seen, goes back to what I said about making sense for the journey of the character. And that is the way that Scar is killed, or not he's killed, the way he dies in the original.
Mm-hmm.
Scar sacrifices.
Scar does not get a happy ending.
He doesn't. But he actually brings up this idea. And this idea, to me, one of the first times I heard it was said by the operative from the movie Serenity. And I'm not going to go into that, but he said he's going to create this new world. And that is what Scar was trying to do. He was trying to create this new world for his people. And in Serenity, one of the other characters says, well, you're a murderer. How could you ever live in that kind of world? You're not a peaceful person. And he says, I'm not going to live there. There's no place for me there any more than there is for you. I am a monster. What I do is evil. I have no illusions about it, but it must be done. And Scar kind of lives by that philosophy.
Sorry. I keep interrupting you. I'm so sorry. But just to clarify, that was a quote from the operative from Serenity, which again, fantastic movie. Which although the operative's death wasn't one of my favorites, there's another death from that character that from that show, that movie, that actually made me scream when it happened, and I won't mention specifically who it is, but it is tragic.
So what point were you trying to come around to by that? What were you trying to connect back to that?
Just trying to make sure that everybody understood that was not a quote from Scar.
Oh, okay. So anyway, Scar realizes that if, in order to create this world, in order to find peace for the people of Lior, who are going to be the new people of Ishbal, or Ishval, depends on which version of it you watch, he's like, I am a murderer. He accepts the fact that in order to create this new world, he has to kill people. But that also means that he doesn't get to live in the world that he creates. And I think that makes his death in the original, so artfully done, is that he's like, I'm going to hand this, he sacrifices himself as the final piece to create the Philosopher's Stone. And he goes into that knowing that he is going to die. And I truly believe that that's how he feels, because he knows that if I'm going to create a peaceful world for these people and give them the tool to survive, a peaceful place is not, it does not work for me. His master tells him earlier that a man who inflicts suffering cannot rest ever. And he reflects on that a bit right before he dies. And I think that is just a great example of how you can take a character, and once their arc is done, then that is a time that you can kill off that character.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's no reason for the character to be alive, then yeah, that is totally the time where you can consider killing a character off. You shouldn't be afraid to kill your characters and kill your babies, as I believe it. George R.R. Martin was famously quoted as saying. To kind of change gears though away from Fullmetal Alchemist, because again, we could do an episode entirely dedicated to just the deaths from Fullmetal Alchemist. Fantastic series that
I could
really
talk about Fullmetal Alchemist all day long. You
could
have no
write
idea.
a thesis on it. I understand this, but that is a show that obviously knows how to do death well, with one exception. But we'll get to that in a minute.
No, Arthur, get to it now. I saw it on your list. Tell me what you wrote,
We'll get
Arthur.
to it when we do bad character deaths. We'll make it our first one, but going to something different, to one of my personal favorite series, Gurren Lagann. The death of Kamina, I hold as one of the best and it could have been done so wrong, but it did that balancing act just well enough. And it technically also pulls off a character resurrection, sort of. So to give people context, when Kamina dies, he is standing proudly on the deck of the enemy's flagship, proudly proclaiming his manliness to the sky, as we have seen him do a half dozen times before, when suddenly he is just skewered from beneath and just woof, there you go, like he's gone. That's it. And the entire list of good guys are all like, well, holy shit, how do we, that was literally our fearless leader that just got murked. Oh, how are we supposed to react to this now? And they try to keep fighting, and they start getting their butts kicked. And Kamina's like, I guess I can't die yet. That forcing,
he uses his protagonist powers.
Uses the power, the last bit of the power of the protagonist to come back to life and save the day and defeat the bad guys. But again, surprisingly enough, that is consistent with the rules of Gurren Lagann. And typically the rules of Gurren Lagann are, there are no rules so long as you believe in yourself enough. It literally takes that shonen trope of, if you believe in yourself enough, you can do anything, and it makes that an actual mechanic in the show.
So I want to, say how that is a death that actually works for the series. Because, and this was just something I was thinking about, Gurren Lagann is not Kamina's story.
No.
Simone's story. But
yes.
Simone's story cannot start while Kamina is still there. Kamina is such a big, powerful character that, think about it, could Simone's story have happened with Kamina still there?
No, not at all.
It's like, could this powerful force, Simone cannot have his story, which is what the story of Gurren Lagann is supposed to be, if Kamina is there. And it's that push. Unfortunately, I didn't have the same reaction to that you did. That death was spoiled for me well ahead of time. And I knew it was coming. It does not lessen its impact on the story. It does not lessen the fact that it was still good. It just, for me, was not as surprising as it could have been.
Which is tragic, but it hits all the marks for me. It definitely has a meaningful impact on their world and story. Even literally at the final fight against the big bad evil guy, they shout out, "We humans used to have someone so much stronger than us," talking about Kamina. And so it is a routine thing that people reference for the rest of the series of, well, Kamina's dead, we got to deal with that at some point, even though the rest of the series takes place over the course of years. And again, it comes as a natural part of the plot. If you stand, proudly boasting about your manliness on the deck of the enemy's capital ship, more likely than not, you're gonna die. It has a deep impact on the protagonist. It has a deep impact on Simone. The entire next 3 episodes were dedicated specifically to Simone's depression and grief over the death of Kamina, until he finally finds his own reasons to continue. And in Kamina's dying words, "Don't believe in the me that believes in you, believe in the you that believes in yourself." He has to find solace in those words, take meaning in it, and learn to move on.
So there's one more that I want to talk about, because you and I actually disagree on this one. Before we draw in, we actually have a third person here to speak with us today, but there's one I want to talk about, and I think it might segue really nicely. I think, personally, and this is on my bad list, I think Genkai's death from Yu Hakusho is badly done, and it's stupid, and I hate it. And I know you disagree with me, but I don't think that Genkai's death was done well. Let me take that back. Her death was done well. Her resurrection was
invalidated
stupid,
her death.
and it invalidates the whole thing, and it makes me blindingly furious.
So here's how I disagree with that. I disagree with that because the rules of the show, the rules of the world, would make her staying gone so much worse for me. Because as a fact of his day job, his day-to-day life involves the protagonist going back and forth from the world of the living to the world of the dead, the spirit world. He is the spirit detective. He routinely crashes into the king of the spirit world's office, calls him a toddler bitch to his face, takes his job, grabs his money, and goes. Like that's his day-to-day. That's his 9 to 5. So if Genkai had died, gone to the spirit world, and that was the last we ever saw of her, I would have been so angry, because here's this fantastic character, and we know Yusuke is the kind of guy, he is not afraid to call the god a bitch to his face. So why would he be afraid to kick open Genkai's heavenly room and go, old bitch, why the fuck are you still dead?
See, but the point of her dying was that so that Yusuke could stand on his own 2 feet, so that Yusuke could graduate from his training, so that he could move on and become his own person. So I don't think he would have done that, because he, realized, I'll let that old bag rest, whatever. But he would have come to terms with it, because he had the time to grieve and to move on, because he realized what her sacrifice meant. And by bringing her back, it takes away all of the emotion, especially, a rewatchability. It takes away all the emotion of that. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, well, we're so sad right now, but she comes back later. And it really undercuts all of that. The fact that they bring her back later on. And I think that the show, the rest of the series could have been exactly the same without her.
I would argue that it wouldn't be exactly the same. It would have a massively different impact on Yusuke and his entire arc. You suggested, when we were talking before we started recording, that Yusuke could have trained the
He definitely could have.
But putting Yusuke, who at this point is still this rambunctious, angry, pissed off at the world teenager who fights first and asks questions never, putting him in charge of other people and giving him a leadership role would be so far away from his established character at that point that it would completely change his emotional development over the course of the series.
But part of him being in the Dark Tournament is the fact that he has to lead Team Urameshi. He is the leader. They named the team after him. He is the leader of the team. And the team really doesn't need a leader. And it's not to say that he leads, but it's the fact that he realizes some of the mistakes that he saw in himself, and that he'll see those in other people, in the psychics that Genkai trains. Or you could have introduced another character. You could have had Botan train them. Why does it have to be Genkai? Why could she not get... The woman's like 800 years old.
She's not.
Why does she not deserve her peaceful rest?
Though, to ask a question, doesn't he spend like half of the Dark Tournament either sleeping or unconscious in some form or
another? No, he spends the first fight up until Chu comes out asleep.
Yeah.
And then he actually there's one fight that he does not participate in. There's one fight. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but that's the only one.
Like a solid
like,
third of the tournament, he's either missing because he's off training to match with the spirit orb, or he's asleep, or he's like doing something else. So a third of their fights he's not there for, though.
No. He is asleep for the first part of the fight against the first team.
Mm-hmm.
And he misses the fight against Team Yuriotogi. That's the team that has all the special items.
Yeah.
That's the only time he misses. He is an integral part. He's the main character, and he only misses that fight because he's trying to absorb the spirit orb, and he misses that fight because later on, Genkai tries to fight Toguro after she's given him that, and she dies.
She dies, and that's how she dies.
He is an integral part of every other fight. There is the one where the other team, the ninja team, they cheat and get him disqualified after he does 2 fights. He fights against against the team, the Dr. Ichigaki team with the humans, and that's when we see young Genkai for the first time. So no, he is there for almost everything. He's the protagonist.
That doesn't
okay.
We're getting. I would at this point be like, well, Goku misses the vast majority of the fights in his series, but anyway, we're getting off the point.
So what I actually want to do is we have a guest with us. He's actually our sound editor and our producer. This is a good friend of mine. We've been friends for a long time. This is Hunter. Say hi.
Hey.
So I want your take. Which one of us do you actually agree with?
I actually agree with more of Lady Ravah, because this is what I feel like. I feel like Yusuke would have been able to accept Genkai's death, and I feel like at that same token, even though she is dead, an apparition of Genkai would have still been able to train the psychics, and they would have been able to tell Yusuke that your old teacher trained us, and Yusuke would have been able to accept that. And I would have been able to accept an apparition appearing to Yusuke one more time during the series to encourage him. And that would have been a sort of quote unquote resurrection without being a resurrection if let's say like almost like an Obi-Wan moment where her voice would come into her head and she would say, "Hey, did you forget what I taught you?" And then disappear again. He could say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I would be more okay with that.
I just want to no, you got the energy wrong. I was like, "Hey, dumbass, did you forget what I?"
Yeah. Oh, yeah, crap.
But
you little
it
shit.
wouldn't, and going back to my point, it would not undercut the impact that her death originally had. It would keep it as still a good death, but still keep her as part of the series and still work within the lore of the universe.
Yeah, because it doesn't mean that Yusuke would ever see her again. The psychics would just tell him after the fact that his old teacher appeared as a spirit to help them. And I think he would be able to accept that she came out of retirement once.
Yeah,
right.
And I can accept that. I could honestly say that, yes, Genkai's death and specifically her resurrection could have been handled a lot better. Let's talk about, however, what you wanted to talk about before. One of the character deaths that I think was bad, that you were glaring daggers at me about.
I see what he's looking at.
And Hunter, we can totally bring you in on this. But in the original 2003 Fullmetal Alchemist anime, I don't like the way they handled Sloth's death. I don't. So to provide context, in the 2003 anime, how you create a homunculus is you attempt human alchemy, and then the mangled up corpse that you tried to human alchemy on becomes a homunculus. And it is a body without a soul. And when you come to find out that when Ed and Al performed human alchemy to try to bring their mother back to life, it created this mangled up corpse, and they were like, "Oh, well, whatever, it's dead." They don't go, "Oh, well, whatever, it's actually a massive part of their character growth." But that homunculus then grows on to become the character Sloth. It looks just like their mother, and it has the same voice as their mom. But the final confrontation has her basically teasing Ed like, "Oh, but I'm your mother. Why would you hit me?" And he just goes, "Shut up, you're not my mom." And he keeps attacking her. There is at no point in the fight where he feels any kind of like hesitation or remorse or like this is possibly my mom. I might actually could be able to like talk through this person. There's none of that. It is just like, nope, you're a fucking monster. I'm just gonna kill you.
So you can't see this, but I'm currently looking around the room for my camera from the office as to see who's filming this and who is pranking me right now. Hunter, what do you think about that first before I go into my tirade?
So I'm in between because what I feel like, and this actually goes to something I'm going to talk about later, is duration of death. Now, I love the workup to where he has to dig up the remains. Mm-hmm. I do love the fact that she tells him at the beginning of the fight that she loves her children, but at the same time, those were memories of a previous life that pain her to have, and she has to forge a new one. What I don't like is the duration of death when he puts it in her and then she slowly withers away while talking. I would have much rathered him shoving it in have ruptured her organs and her die in seconds. And I think that would have been a much more powerful moment for Ed as well, a very traumatic moment, because it would have sealed the deal. There he got to say his goodbyes to his mom. It would have been more of a life or death. Either I kill her now or she kills me.
Kind of like how Greed dies.
Yeah, and I wish that I just didn't like the duration, how long it took for it to evaporate. I would have rather been an instant death that he makes out of desperation because he cannot reason with her. But so I'm a mixed bag about that death. I don't think it was all bad, but I definitely think it had a few things. Yeah.
So I want to go back to actually something that you said. It really directly impacts the characters. It causes a lot of conflict between Ed and Al of whether they should kill her or not. Is she really their mother? And the series doesn't really answer that, and I kind of like that. I do agree. I do actually think that looking at it, yes, it's too long. Because what happens is he turns her body into methane and she evaporates. So technically, he doesn't kill her in the same way that the other homunculi are killed.
She just exists. There's a million atoms scattered about the atmosphere for the rest of the time. That's so horrible.
The conflict that it creates between Ed and Al is very important because it's their different types of philosophies. Al fully believes that this is his mother, and Ed understands that while it may be, it is still the culmination of the worst mistake that they have ever made, and they have to be adults. You know, that's something that they keep being told. You want to be an adult, you got to be an adult. So it's like, all right, I got to be an adult, and I got to own up to my mistake. And, you know, his philosophy is to get rid of it, or his idea is to get rid of it.
But I just don't, again, I would have liked to see better, more conflict from Ed about having to do that, to having to deal with that. Like there's absolutely no point. And again, I guess it kind of goes back to why Al is one of my favorite characters, is that he genuinely believes that a soul is not a physical thing that you can just pull from one place and put to another place. It is a culmination. It is memories, it is joy, it is love, and it's like this being, this homunculus has the memories of our mom. Why can't the homunculus be our mom? It wants to be a mom. It wants to be a mom to another homunculus, but we can still reason with it. We can still talk to it. They reason with lust. Lust turns to and becomes a good guy by the end of the series. She gets murdered, but she becomes a good guy. They can be talked to. They can be reasoned and changed. But every single time she tries to say anything to Ed, he just goes, nope, not listening, not listening, not listening to you, and he keeps going for the kill. And every time Al tries to reason with him, he's just like, shut up, Al. I could hear the argument that like he's intentionally not wanting to hear the idea that he could be wrong, because if he's wrong, how horrible does that make him as a person that he's trying to kill his resurrected mother? I don't like how they handled that. I wish that if they were gonna go for the sloth as his mom route, that they were really gonna lean hard, or at least harder than they did, into it.
Okay. I can see why you didn't like it, but I am going to disagree.
Fair enough.
Hunter, bringing you in, I really like how you have your criteria broken down. It's very as my teacher brain works, it's like a rubric. So I really like how you have it divided. So how do you have your definition of a good character death defined?
You know, great teachers think alike.
Exactly.
Hey.
So I have criteria, and then I have situations that I can talk about later. But my criteria, number one is stakes. The death carries weight in the story, and the story fundamentally changes because of their death. Timing/duration, and that's not just timing within the story, but are they snuffed out? Is this a long-term death of an illness that's been taking a long time? Is it a self-sacrifice? Is it a wild card death where you never saw it coming? Or is it something where they're just on screen dying for 5 minutes and you're like, okay, well, but how are you not dead yet? The method, is it self-sacrifice? Is it like Kamina? Is it because of their own cockiness? Is it through desperation? Is it forced against their will, or do they readily accept it? And also, the effect and how this changes the story, because sometimes it can fundamentally change the story, but it doesn't mean it changes it in a good way. Not good as in how the characters feel, but good as in it just destroys the writing. So do you want me to go ahead and I guess talk about my specific example to prove the criteria?
Yeah,
well, I think because I've looked at something that we all have on our list. And I know it's going to piss some people off, but let's get into some of these Star Wars characters, because Star Wars handles death in
good and bad ways.
Yes.
So actually, hot take. I don't like the way Yoda dies. That is one of my bad character deaths. I think that it comes out of nowhere, especially if you just take in the context of the original trilogy with no other extra media. It comes out of nowhere. All we know is that Yoda is a wise guy, and he's very strong in the Force. He basically gets to a point where he's like, I don't want to answer your questions anymore, and he dies. And like that,
he dies, so he doesn't have to answer Luke's questions anymore.
He is annoyed to death.
Let's look at the criteria: stakes,
There's no
stakes
sake for him
dying.
being alive or being dead.
Timing and duration, he literally says to Luke, shut up and let me die.
Yeah.
Method, he's old.
He's old.
Effect,
He's old.
The story doesn't change because he dies. So
No,
even
not
though
at
it
all.
tugged at my heartstrings growing up, yeah.
It's not a very well handled. Like, I guess you could put it as like it is a sad character death if you take it in context of the expanded universe that explores Yoda when he was younger. But really, there's like what 30 years, 20 years that take place between Revenge of the Sith and Empire Strikes Back, or specifically Return of the Jedi.
I think it's closer to like 24, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's because Luke in A New Hope, he's born at the end of Sith, and he's like 18.
Something like 17 or 8, 17,
Yeah.
I think, actually. So yeah, there's like 20 something years that happen between him super ninja flipping his way around the Senate room, throwing benches at Palpatine, and him being like, "Well, I'm too old to live anymore." Like,
Well, I did read so I made a specific note that I don't count extended lore. And the only reason I'm counting this is because to me it makes a lot of sense in just assumptions. But I did read that the pain of literally feeling every Jedi across the entire galaxy being snuffed out for 20 years had the depression and grief of that had a lasting impact on his physicality, which is real to experiencing trauma can shorten your lifespan.
are you saying that he died of a broken heart, like how Padme did?
Oh no.
So
We're seeing a side of Arthur I've
no.
never seen. This cackling menace, a phantom menace.
the Phantom Menace.
The worst.
Is that something that also needs to die?
Yes,
No,
it is.
But I can agree with that. I loved Yoda as a character. Return of the Jedi is actually my personal favorite Star Wars movie. I fully recognize that it is not the best Star Wars movie. It's my personal favorite. But yeah, you're right. Him dying, Luke is the only person who knows. He's the only person who cares, and he's the only person who acknowledges it. I think Vader kind of goes, "Oh, okay."
Yoda
And then
said?
and because like you said earlier, Palpatine already thought he was dead, so it doesn't impact him in any way.
Which is kind of strange because Palpatine and Vader were literally the Force antennas finding every other Jedi in the galaxy, and Yoda had so much Force power they probably could have normally felt him from like several parsecs away.
So, again, going into extended lore, is that he specifically goes to Dagobah because that planet is so enriched with the Force that even Palpatine wouldn't be able to sense him there because there's already so much Force energy on Dagobah that what a little bit more from Yoda.
But you've said this before. Why do I have to do extra homework to understand the movies? Because again, we're sticking with Yoda from his character death in the movies and just considering the cinematic part of the universe. It would be the same thing as like, oh well, this thing happened in the comics with Spider-Man, so this should be better. It's like I don't want to have to do homework to understand my movies.
Speaking of characters and terrible deaths that people unanimously hate unless they're entrenched in the extended lore, which again we should not have to, is Count Dooku. Count Dooku's death destroys all 4 criteria I wrote, and the only way he ticks off any of those boxes is if you deeply dive into extended lore that aren't even animated. It's like you have to read wiki pages.
Yeah. Count Dooku's death in Revenge of the Sith is not very properly handled.
No.
So I'm going to actually say that when he first mentioned that before we started recording, I was like, oh yeah, that actually happened. I had completely forgotten that had happened.
Exactly.
So yeah, I totally agree. His was handled well, but I think his is an example of that is not something that they had planned when episode 1 came out.
Yeah, Count Dooku might not have been planned, but that doesn't mean that they had to resort to something that bad. They still had a few years making that movie that they could have come up with something. And his whole thing in episode 3 was just to show how much Anakin had grown. But there's better ways to do that rather than him getting his hands cut off by a movie he should have easily been able to stop. And then Anakin feeling really some type of way about it and saying it's not the Jedi way, even though he's killed several people in a fit of rage. It's not the Jedi way. And at the same time, he's killed very suddenly, and it doesn't matter in the story at all. And a really quick parallel I wanted to show, breaking away from visual media for a second, is actually Glader in the Inheritance series. And the reason I chose them, they are both extremely old and very set as very powerful people in that world. Some of those powerful people to have ever existed. Glader, even though his Dragon Rider was severely limited, Glader himself was one of the most powerful dragons left in existence. And so they both share a lot of similarities, but the difference is that Glader had a much more profound impact on the story. Glader was killed in a fit of rage and grief after his Dragon Rider was brought down. He was killed by the main bad guy of the series, and it's the first time you ever see his power. He's been a complete wild card until this point. You have no clue, and he doesn't even do it with his own hand. He does it by possessing someone else. And so, to me, it both sets the stage of the power cap of the series of they're like, oh, this is what he can actually do. And at the same time, you've gotten to know, kind of like Nina in Fullmetal Alchemist 2003, you've gotten to know Glader for a book and a half at this point, and his death resonates so much harder in the way that he dies versus Count Dooku. And he even, in some ways, gets a small bit, a half resurrection, but the resurrection is even more heartbreaking because his resurrection is just him screaming in grief and remorse and anger into the void of his heartstone, and they can't even communicate with him.
Right. And he doesn't have the same mobility that he does. He's literally just a heartstone that was given to Eragon because he said, I know I'm going to die at some point, and that might be before this war is over, and I know you are going to need me, so I'm going to go ahead and give you this. And he does that knowing that there's a good chance that he can die. And I think that, that older character being killed off, it's very, it's much better done. I do actually think the Inheritance trilogy, which Inheritance is my personal favorite book of all time, it handles death very well. It does at some point, I think, gratuitously kill a couple of characters, but some of the big character deaths it has, like Braum, Glader, Oramus, are handled very well.
Yeah, and the reason I didn't include Oramus on that is Oramus, you kind of see his death coming because he's very weak. He's punching way above his weight. But even though he is that way, Glader is still touted as a complete powerhouse and the most powerful dragon any of them had ever seen. And the only reason that they thought someone was more powerful, that Thorn might be more powerful than Glader, is because Murtaugh had some crazy
magical enhancements.
Yeah, some crazy hacks magic that they thought should not have really been possible in the ancient language, but they had figured out some crazy shit using other dragons' heartstones they had tortured, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, crazy stuff. Speaking of resurrections, we talked about Genkais. I wanted to bring up two resurrections that I think one is done very well and one happens 37 times and is piss poor. And you probably know which series I'm talking about. I'll start with the bad first. As much as Dragon Ball Z has a special place in my heart for all time, but the fact that not only is Goku brought back over and over, but they say, due to Saiyan biology, that he is now stronger every time, to the point to where at one point in Dragon Ball Super, Vegeta's like, we're so strong, I don't know if that works anymore.
And I've actually said that before, is that I grew up watching DBZ. I remember coming home every day in middle school, watching the Buu saga, being super excited. But death, especially with Goku, they try to tell us that it means something, but they've taken away all of the impact by the amount of times they resurrect Goku. Even Vegeta's sacrifice, which again, Vegeta is, like I said in the last episode, he's my favorite character. His sacrifice doesn't mean anything because he's later brought back to life.
So actually, I was struggling about like, should I put Vegeta's death against Majin Buu on the good death or the bad death? And I realized that the reason why that scene is so impactful isn't because Vegeta dies; it's because Vegeta atones, not through his death, but through his actions. Okay, he dies. That's a strong fighter out of the game to fight Buu. Yeah, cool. But what was actually really good and powerful about that scene is the fact that he decides, you know what? Screw my pride, screw being strong. I am doing this because it is the right thing to do. And that's why that character arc coming full circle is such a powerful moment. Because I still remember that watching that scene, I was like, man, that's God, that's such a cool scene. But I knew that the next episode, I was like, but it's Dragon Ball Z. He's not gonna stay dead because they have literal magical balls that bring people back to life.
Okay. So that was really important because of that, but the way that the series itself handles death later on, again, it doesn't have that lasting impact, because that episode, yes, it had that impact, but then it's like, oh, Vegeta, hey, what's up? Did you take another trip to the land of the dead again? Okay, cool.
Yeah, and so in this parallel, it's not just resurrections, it's also self-sacrifice in this as well, because there are several times that Goku literally just sacrifices himself and dies. And so the parallel series I think did very well is actually Hunter x Hunter. And I'm sparing my two friends here by not saying which character, but if you know, you know. There is a character that basically dies. They come so close to death that they are only kept alive through the miracles of modern medicine using breathing machines and blood circulation machines. And they are revived. They are dead. They die in a fit of self-sacrifice. They do something similar that happens in Yu Hakusho, where at one point Yusuke's like, I'm going to use my life energy because it's stronger than spirit energy, and I'm pissed off. But he lives because Kuwabara gives him some of his life energy, and they're just kind of injured for a bit. But this doesn't happen here. He uses all of his life energy as opposed to the regular, magic, the Nen. And when he is revived, the difference is the trade-off is he loses all connection to that world's magic. He ceases to be a main character. In the continued story, he's not there. He goes back home, and that's it. And that's the end of it. And I really appreciate that because, yes, the characters get that moment of relief knowing they've saved a friend, but he paid the price. If you give up everything and sacrifice yourself, that's the end of the road.
So I think to, branch off of that, going our criteria, death is it's a big deal. In the real world, when somebody dies, they're close to us. That's a big deal. But if you're going to use death, you have to make a big deal. Like your Hunter x Hunter example, I don't really have the context for that, but I understand, they're like, hey, this guy almost died, and that's a big deal. Whereas DBZ treats it like, oh, well, he just give him a senzu bean, he'll be all right.
I know, I love how Dragon Ball Z Abridged actually refers to it, where they're like, really? You're threatening Krillin? His death is a day trip for us and a Sunday for him. Like, whereas it's a day trip for us and a free ice cream sundae for him, because they made the joke earlier that if you die 3 times, you get a free ice cream. Like literally, death has no meanings. And when Gohan complains about, oh god, no, my dad's dead, Krillin's just like, Gohan, Dragon Balls.
So something that has a really mixed bag of these types of deaths, you've got resurrections, you've got fake outs, you've got all of these different criteria on both the good and the bad side, is one Naruto. So I will let you guys actually take this away, because I like Naruto. I enjoyed it, but I also realized that as an almost 30-year-old woman, I am not the target audience for Naruto. So
Naruto is voiced by like a 60-year-old woman. Come on.
You're the target audience for Naruto, just not Boruto. Boruto is meant for elementary schoolers.
Yeah, no, nobody likes that. The best part about Boruto are the parts where Boruto's not in it.
So would you like to set up a standard of what a good death in Naruto is, or do you want to just do hot takes?
I'll start, because actually one of my favorite anime deaths is from Naruto. It's the death of Jiraiya. Jiraiya hits every single box It is impactful on the characters and the story and the world. It sets a very clear stake. It makes sense in the world in which that it exists. He doesn't just get overpowered and gets wiped out. Like, he puts up a massive fight against an overwhelming foe, and he still does a really good job against taking on this foe. It is not a sudden death. It is and he doesn't have time for a finishing monologue. Like, his final thoughts are literally his dying thoughts as he begins to drown.
I just want to point out the stark similarities I just noticed in story and death between Jiraiya and Glader.
Because again, they follow
almost the same.
A very similar archetype. They are the wise mentor who dies.
Wise, extremely powerful mentor.
Yeah. Again, going to Bruce Campbell's The Hero with 1,000 Faces, which if you haven't read that, I highly suggest it. It was actually mandatory reading in my AP English class back in high school, and I don't regret it at all. The wise mentor who dies is a character trope. It is a character archetype. It is your Gandalf. It is your Obi-Wan. It is your Oramis. It is your Jiraiya. It is the mentor, Asuma, actually, because I like how Naruto handles the fact that, there are more wise mentors than just Naruto's. And the fact that they handle Asuma's death actually really similar to Jiraiya's.
You could even argue that Maze Hughes fits the wise old mentor archetype. He's not an old man, but
he is a mentor to Ed and Al. Absolutely, he is.
Well, by their perspective, he's an old man.
Yeah,
right,
he's like a solid 15 years older than them.
Right.
However, let's talk about, because you actually have a hot take on the character death in Naruto.
Spicy hot take coming in. I hate Neji's death. Now I'm going to go ahead and say, I do not. So I hate the setup.
The torches and pitchforks.
Yeah, I hate the setup, and I hate what comes after it. So when I'm looking at the boxes, stakes, he's done nothing in Shippuden. He's actually almost done nothing since the Sasuke retrieval arc.
Yeah. That's honestly the last time that his character was relevant.
Yeah, they literally the only stakes he has is Naruto goes, one of my 17 best friends that I haven't talked to in 117 episodes just died, and so I'm gonna power up now. Like, it's like that one part from Dragon Ball Z Abridged when he's like, are you gonna power up? He's like, yeah, I think I'll power up now, thanks. Timing, it's such duration, he has like a 5-minute dying monologue being like,
You called me a genius.
A genius. And then Naruto talks back and he goes back. And then after that, you have another 5 minutes of Obito going, ha ha ha, you cannot save anyone.
So to me, that actually messes up the world, because realistically, I haven't made it this far, but I pretty much know what's happened. But I imagine Obito is just kind of like, he's just going to stand there and I guess wait for Neji to finish his monologue. Like, it doesn't seem realistic. Like, you're in the middle of a fight. He had to jump in front of Naruto because he had to save him really quick. But then Obito is just going to chill out and let Neji finish his monologue. Is he? From what I understand, he's not a nice guy.
I know we were just ragging on Dragon Ball, but one of my favorite parts of Dragon Ball Super is when a villain, Zamasu, goes to do the monologue and he gets punched in the face because they're like, dude, you were wide open.
Yeah, like, come on, like, you're going to monologue in the middle of a fight? Yeah, I'm going to punch you. Actually, that's not the first time that Akira Toriyama did that. In the fight, Goku versus Jason Birder, Jason's like, we are the Ginyu, and then Goku just punches him and he goes, what? You were talking. I saw an opening. I punched you. Why are you angry at me?
So how does it not fit the rest of the criteria?
Method. It is a self-sacrifice, but it's a self-sacrifice that comes out of nowhere because Hinata went for it and then he jumped in front. But in that same token, both of them no rotation that blows away
and we've seen them doing this to block this same attack multiple times.
And Hinata has that other Lion Fist thing. She could have broken them. And Naruto at this point in the series is the most powerful person to have ever exist. He could have literally, like, he knows the yellow flash. He could have out. So it's like, how...
So actually, no, that's, I don't mean to interrupt, but he does not actually know the space-time jutsu. He does not know how to teleport. He just moves so fast that everybody thinks he's teleporting, which is, to me, even more impressive.
Yeah. So either way with that, so the fact that happened, that was totally just like, oh, we need an emotional moment. And I've heard, because of Arthur, that It's handled much better in the manga, which tells me basically they were like, oh, we have 25 minutes to fill out in this episode. I guess this death is going to last 10, you know.
No, because the Naruto anime has such a bad habit where they'll end on like a big moment, like oh god, I can't wait to see what happens next, and then they'll pad out the next episode with just talking and flashbacks and talking and and it's like the manga is not written like that. It's like not for like there are occasions. Let me rewind and say like there are occasions where the manga is flashback heavy, but not like the anime. Like honestly, there's an entire like 10 episode arc in the final fight against Kaguya in the anime where it's a flashback that does not happen in the manga.
Ooh.
The flashback in the manga is over the course of like a single volume and like that's it, done.
So I have a question for Lady Ravah.
Yes.
Speaking of your distaste for resurrections, how do you feel about Gaara?
So that made me angry because honestly, like that was like, oh shoot, they're killing Gaara. Like that's a big deal. Up until that point, is this after Gaara dies after Asuma, right?
No, before.
No. Okay. So, but like Gaara's is supposed to be like, you know, one of the first big impactful moments.
Mm-hmm. He's reformed.
And then they're like,
he's reformed,
yeah, and he's reformed and he's changed, but you know, maybe that wasn't enough. And he gets brought back. And I was like,
and they kill a secondary character.
That we've, again, going to the duration, we haven't really known her that long. So I don't really feel
and she's
bad.
Old, so she's probably going to die soon anyways.
And it's like, you know, I didn't really feel that bad. And I kind of wish I would have gotten to see Naruto facing the consequences of this idea that he can't save everybody just because he's the main character.
Yeah, and I really hated that. It felt like such an ass pull. It felt like she was like, but wait, I know this secret jutsu that no one else is supposed to know that will take my life, but I'm old anyway, so here I did it. And it's like, what, why?
It breaks one of my rules. It is not consistent with the world that we know as it thus far.
Because you never see that jutsu again, do you?
No, never.
Like, why did nobody?
She's the only one. Quote,
you know,
unquote,
why did
knows
nobody do that on Kushina? Why did nobody do that on Minato?
Because again, like she's the only one who knows it. And again,
then who taught it to her?
It's supposed to kill you once you do it. But again, like I said, one of my definitions for a bad character death is that it does not fit with the prescribed lore of the show. If you have to ask pull no jutsu a reason why this person is brought back to life or spared from death, or why this person dies in the first place, then that loses all weight to it.
Yeah, and I want to show because I like to draw parallels, a good version of like coming out of nowhere deaths. And I know that y'all aren't the hugest fans of this, but I'm a big old JoJo nerd. And I want to talk about in part 5, there is a character named Abakio that dies unceremoniously and so quick. And it literally just, he is doing something. He doesn't know that what the boss looks like, what the main villain looks like. And literally the boss walks up to him, stand appears. He gets a hole put through his body, and it's very clear that he instantly dies. And there is no time for mourning. It's so unlike the Neji death, because unlike that one, he gets no monologue. The team does not get to see him in his final moments. They walk up 5 minutes later and he's laying there just dead. And I think that's very powerful.
And I do like that parallel. I do want to mention there is a character. I'm not going to say the specific character because it's really important for this not to be spoiled for you. But in the movie Serenity, there is a character that the same thing happens to them. You know, there's just been this really big, impactful thing, and you think there's finally going to be a quiet moment,
really cool moment, and then
harpoon, and this is like a space harpoon. You know, we know that there's no going back. There's
dead.
There's no magic or anything like this in this universe, and the characters aren't given time to mourn. It's like no.
We gotta go, guys. Like we are on a time crunch.
There's still monsters here. We gotta go. And you see something similar, but that doesn't mean that his death isn't impactful. So I think that's a good, and I think ender and closer to that.
It also sets the mood for the finale there of Serenity, because they don't have time to mourn it. And with that character's death, you immediately get put in the mindset as the viewer that oh God, anybody could die now. If they're going to kill this character, anybody.
Exactly.
Anybody's on the chopping block now.
I mean, that's kind of the same idea you get in like the first season of Attack on Titan, in that one episode where 2/3 of Eren's class dies, and you're like, oh,
munched.
Anyone can die. Yeah. So I think it's a very powerful thing. Plot armor ruins shows.
It does.
That's
really
the
does.
takeaway from today's episode. Plot armor ruins shows.
So
it ruins a lot of things.
I'm looking at our timer. We're actually a little bit over an hour into this recording now. So unfortunately, I think it's about time for us to start wrapping things up. Go ahead.
So if you enjoyed the episode, do please give us a subscribe, ring that notification bell, or follow us on our respective podcast channels. Look forward to this, more bi-weekly episodes. And with that, the court is now adjourned.
Take care.
See you guys.